Hello everyone, welcome to Sci-Fi Christian. I am Ben DeBono, back for the penultimate Dante video. Today we are, well, at least for this read-through. Sure that many of you probably will assume, rightly, that I have much more I could say about Dante that has been covered in this video series, and no doubt some of that will be said at some point. But for this read-through, we are almost at the end. Today we covered Cantos 21 through 27 of Paradiso, and next time, 28 through 33, the final canto, both of Paradiso and of the Commedia. And a very moving piece of literature. I'm very excited to talk about that section with you next week. But for today, we covered two regions of paradise. We have the, I think it's the seventh sphere, Saturn, of the contemplatives, and we see Jacob's ladder and all that good stuff. And then we have the fixed stars, where we see the apostles and especially St. Peter and everything. To me, these sections, I find them very moving, as I do, a lot of Paradiso. I think that Paradiso, like we've talked about, is very tough to read the first time or two. And then after you've done that, and you kind of are able to accept it as being so vastly different from the other two canticles, you kind of can open yourself up to it and almost embrace it as a religious experience to read it. Not to say that there aren't elements of narrative enjoyment there, or certainly vast elements of scholarliness to go along with it. But there is also the sense of that, at least for me, reading it as somebody who is within the Christian tradition, where it becomes a very powerful religious experience as well. And I think you feel that here a lot in these cantos, though in a slightly different way, because to me these 7 cantos, and especially the section in the fixed stars, feels like the calm before the storm. It's to continue some of the comparison that I've made, and certainly, again, this is an original comparison to me, but between the comedy and the Mass, this is the moment where the consecration is about to take place, or has taken place, and it's almost time to get out of your seat and approach the altar and receive the Eucharist. But not yet. It's that moment of anticipation, that moment of preparation. It's probably a very good word for it, considering the 3 examinations that Dante goes through in this section. It's that last, is there anything else that I need to get off my chest before God before I go up and receive the body and blood of Christ? And so I think that this is a section where, if you're not reading it from that perspective, from the religious perspective, it can be maybe a section to struggle with a little bit, because it feels like, okay, come on, let's get to God already. Let's go. And you kind of feel like that's about where it's going to go around Canto 23 or 24, whatever the one is, where it must be 23. Or maybe 24, I don't know. But the one where they ascend to the fixed stars, and, you see Mary there, and you see, this kind of almost parallel to the procession that we saw in the Garden of Eden at the end of Purgatorio, where it's, prefiguring things to come. You're like, okay, here we go. There's Mary, and there's Jesus, and here comes Gabriel, and everything. And then it's like, and we stop. And Mary goes back up to heaven. Well, she's already in heaven, but she goes up farther into heaven. And we then sit around and talk to Peter and everything, which is cool. We get to talk to St. Peter, and we have the 3 examinations, and then Peter's really pissed off about the state of the papacy and everything. And it's kind of like, well, wait a second, but we just saw Mary there. We just saw Jesus. We're so close. And it's like, no, stop, pause, wait. It's almost here, but first there's that final preparation. In the case for Dante, it comes in the form of those 3 examinations. So from a narrative perspective, not a lot to talk about in this one. I think thematically, obviously you have the faith, hope, and love. I found it very interesting that when Peter is going on his rampage, or rant, I guess I should say, against the papacy, when he's talking about how, it was my seat or my chair, I forget his exact words, but he repeats that 3 times. I didn't read up on the notes for that. I should have, because I'm sure that obviously there's a Trinitarian significance there. But it's kind of an interesting moment with him. I like that he gets so blindingly beat red. He's like Mars, is how Dante describes him, which of course is, Mars, both the red planet is part of where the color metaphor comes from, but also the god of war. And so this is, Peter ready to go down and kick some butt and everything. I'll have more to say about that when we get to our devotional section for this week. I think the other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit thematically is to take just a tiny little tangent and discuss briefly the Catholic doctrine of Mary, which, to put it mildly, is controversial. And like I have with a few of these Catholic doctrinal points in this series, I don't think I want to sit here and try and argue and explain what the Catholic position is. I can repeat the usual stuff. Catholics don't worship Mary, blah, 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 all the typical arguments. And maybe there's certainly value in those being repeated from time to time, because there's plenty of people who do think that Catholics actually worship Mary in the same way we would worship Jesus, and just there's a lot of confusion and misinformation regarding that doctrine. But I think that what I prefer to do in discussing this kind of tangent is, rather than try and convince people out there that Catholics are right about Mary, or to clear up arguments or confusion about that, is to maybe just help you get a glimpse of why, whether we're right or wrong, why Catholics take the position we do. And I think you get that glimpse in that canto I was referring to, 23 or 24. I'm pretty sure it's 23, where they have Dante and Beatrice ascend to the fixed stars. And you see Mary there, and you see her. In fact, I'm going to try and find the quote here, because I really love how it goes when Gabriel comes down in the form of the flame. It is Canto 23, I knew it, and calls her back. And he says, I am the angel of love who circles round the deep gladness. I'm reading from Anthony Esselin's translation here, right around line 103. The deep gladness that breathes forth from the womb. The womb. Okay, let me start over. I am the angel love who circles round the deep gladness that breathes forth from the womb, that was the dwelling place of our desire, turning Lady of Heaven, till what time you follow your Son, and make more heavenly the splendor of highest heaven when you came. And then says, so did the ever-circling melody seal up its song, and all the other gleams made Mary's name resound in every sky, the royal mantle, blinding all the realms that constitute the world, most fervent, most alive in the divine breath and in its decrees. As such great distance arched its inner coast, no sight of it had made its way indeed, down to where I was standing far below, so my eyes lacked the power to proceed, following ever higher the crowned flame that rose behind the rising of her seed. That would be Jesus there. And as a little baby lifts his arms, what are you doing, dog? To Mama when he's filled with milk and shows the kindling of the love within its soul, so did those splendors stand with wings that rose, pointing their flames into the highest height, and making manifest how great their love for Mary was. They stood before my sight, singing the Queen of Heaven with no sound so sweet, or with sound so sweet my memory yet treasures with delight. Oh, what a fertile harvest of fine wheat is crammed into those bins in richest measure, who here on earth were such a good fields to sow, Here do they live, here they enjoy the treasure they won with tears they wept in Babylon, in exile when they left the golden scorn. Here triumphs under the exalted Son of God and Son of Mary for his victory with both the ancient council and the new, the one who keeps the keys to such great glory. I just love that image there, of, we have a lot going on there. So we've seen in this canto the reenactment of the triumph of Christ as he, essentially this vision of him, or maybe it's really him within paradise. He comes down to the fixed stars and to this, and we see all the souls praising him, and then he ascends back up, and then Gabriel comes down and he calls Mary, and she ascends after him. And there's such a beautiful honoring of her as the Mother of God, as the Queen of Heaven, as the one who is, I won't reread the whole thing, of course, but just to reread Gabriel's line there, that her womb, the dwelling place of our desire. That, and I think that, to me, if you want to get a glimpse into why Catholics believe what we do about Mary, and do what we do regarding Mary, contemplate that passage, contemplate the beauty of Mary being honored under Jesus, of course, but being honored because Jesus wants her to be, of being the one who bore our desire, our salvation in that sense, and the deep sacrifice that was for her, and the deep honor that was, and how there's a deep, lasting, powerful beauty contained within the relationship between Mary and Jesus, that we're invited then to partake in with our honoring of Mary and our love of her. And again, you say, well, that's great, but we shouldn't pray to Mary. Okay, fine. Let's not debate the doctrine. I just, that, and I'm probably not explaining it well, because like so much in Paradiso, it just goes beyond words, but that moment of contemplation there of the beauty and grandeur of Mary is just breathtaking. It's absolutely breathtaking, and it really is a glimpse of what's to come, both in the sense of what's to come in the final cantos of Paradiso, but then also Mary is, for us, I believe, a glimpse of what's to come in terms of our ultimate salvation. That one day we will enjoy the type of relationship to Jesus as she alone possessed in a unique way. That one day we'll be transformed as she was transformed. I know I'm getting into Catholic doctrine there with the Immaculate Conception. But she's a picture of what our ultimate salvation can look like. So there's real beauty in Mary there that you see. All right, so enough of that tangent. All to say that, if you just are completely perplexed by the Catholic belief about Mary, maybe take a step back from the doctrines a little bit, and just contemplate some passages like that in Paradiso, because I think they give us some really powerful insight into what's going on within the Catholic mind when it comes to the Mother of God. All right, finally, for a devotional reflection for today, what I was thinking about is, and I've talked about this a little bit before, so I won't spend too much time on it, but this whole idea of where I'm very struck when it comes to Peter's rant there in Canto 27, of the way that Dante honors the full range of human emotions, even in heaven. He honors the full breadth of human experience. And he does that because the faith does that, because the church does that. One of the things I find very disquieting about Christianity in its modern form, though really, you can find examples of this throughout history, is the way we tend to maybe find a few issues regarding Christianity, and we focus in on those to the exclusion of everything else. For example, I'd say in the early part of or you know, the mid 20th century, you had within American evangelicalism anyway, you had huge emphases on evangelism, on things like social issues, um, you know, abortion, all that stuff, very important. And there were other issues that were neglected on there. Now we're kind of seeing is that the pendulum is now swung, on the other side, and now we emphasize things like God's mercy, no judgment for anything. We emphasize things like social activism, which is very important. But what's heartbreaking about the church then and the church now in both cases is the way that everything else in the faith gets excluded. And you can see that throughout history, that different eras of church history, different leaders in church history will start movements that focus on one theological issue or one issue of church action, or something like that. Or you see this in just individual churches as well, that here's the church that really goes after doctrine, and here's the church that really goes after just loving people, and and it's like, okay, all really good things. Can't we do more than one at a time? Can't we simultaneously serve people and try and help those in need with no strings attached, while also being a church, and I'm speaking of the church worldwide here, because of course for one individual congregation the resources become more limited, while also as a church recognizing the vast importance of good solid theology, while also devoting ourselves to prayer and to contemplation, while also devoting ourselves to mercy and letting people know God loves them in a profound way, and that no matter how bad you've messed up, God is right there for you. While also experiencing the rage of Peter in Canto 27, and say, and we're really bad at that as the church historically, and we're really bad at that as individuals. But to me, one of the things I'm just utterly convinced about is that the beauty of Christianity is to be found not in choosing one of those little rabbit trails to go down to the exclusion of everything else, but in embracing the whole. And that's not to say that individuals aren't going to be called to focus on one or more of those things, or, the congregations aren't, but that whatever your deal is, if you're a really merciful person, your job is on one hand to balance people who are maybe more justice oriented, with the rage of St. Peter there, but it's also to be balanced by them, right? To recognize that the church opens its arms to all of that it needs all of that, and that when we collectively as a church in any one age say we're going to focus on this, this, and this, and everything else, is put on the back burner, we have neutered the faith in a very real way. And so I think that's maybe, like I said, I've talked about that in other ways before throughout these videos, so I won't spend a lot of time on that, but I think once again we see that even in Paradise, Dante brings us into where we see, even within these cantos, the importance of praise of God and worship of God, and then we see the importance of theology and the importance of self-examination, and then we see the importance of this divine justice that comes through Peter in Canto 27, and we see the importance of mercy in the image of Mary, and it's remarkable the way that Dante is able to do what so few people are able to do, which is to bring in the depth of the church instead of just focusing on one or two pet issues. Alright, so that's what I got for you this week. One more video to go, Cantos 28 through 33, and we will wrap up the comedy next Sunday. Until then, I am Bendy Bones, Sci-Fi Christian. Goodbye.